Hi everyone, this is Chapter 6, The Therapeutic Alliance and the Helping Relationship for Counseling 2500. So, what is a helping relationship? They define in the textbook helping profession is responsible for promoting the well being of humankind. Usually, people enjoy working with people who give up warmth, genuineness, and respect. So, right there, think about yourself. Do you think that people see you as a warm, genuine, and respectful person? If not, that's okay. I would suggest then to start thinking about how you can give off those vibes in an authentic way to who you are as a person. Take those three things to start the therapeutic alliance. An alliance is basically like a team. I'm sure you've seen like on shows like Survivor or Traders and stuff like that, that they build these teams that will help each other, right? So, in a therapeutic alliance is basically a teamwork of two people. Allows people to open up on a deeper level for trust and mutual respect. So, once you're able to establish those things, we're hoping that your client is going to dig deeper and talk about very secret or very quiet or internal thoughts that they've had that they might not have revealed to anyone else. A therapeutic alliance is a one-way relationship with the purpose of resolving a concern and or fostering a personal growth of one person, which is the client. Okay. Counselor is a helper, have the knowledge and training to assist the client in an intentional and systematic way. So sometimes people think that when you become a counselor or a therapist, you're just giving off opinions, and that's not true. Typically, a lot of this stuff has been studied and has been gone through experiments and proven through research, right, that there is proof that this is working, which is why we don't want you all to just say what you think is right. You have to learn and study and see what other people, the techniques that they have created that have been effective. So the goal is to change in behavior and lifestyle, increase awareness of insight and understanding. So maybe your client's coming in because they're feeling very upset about something, and now they're actually aware of what's going on. Relief from suffering, same thing, is you're trying to figure out why you're feeling the way that you're feeling that's uncomfortable so that you can understand why you are feeling uncomfortable. And maybe we can then, from there, change certain ideas or thoughts or self-perceptions about the person, right? Maybe it's something about their children. Let's say you're a parent and you find out that your child's LGBT, QIA+, and you're like, what is going on here? You don't understand. So you probably go through a certain level of thoughts that you have been ingrained and influenced by society, maybe. And then what do you do now that you actually have a child who is of this population? Essentially, a process that enables a person to grow in directions chosen by that person. So very self-directed in that sense, right? We want to know to our clients, what is it that you want to do? How do you want to, let's say, get better, right? How do you want to choose a healthier decision for your life? And the counselor will help make the client aware of possible alternatives and encourage clients' acceptance of responsibility for taking action on one or more of these alternatives. So we'll explore together what have been considered, let's say, effective, and then let the client choose which one, and we can try it out. 3 phases. There's phase 1, which is relationship building, mutual trust to promote exploration. We've talked about this quite a bit, building that teamwork or that alliance, a therapeutic alliance. 2, challenging the clients to find ways to change. So awareness and understanding to try new things, new ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving. So once a client figures out that they need to change or they want to change for the better or for the healthy life that they're going to live, they're going to realize that they have to actually start doing those things, right? And then the third part is facilitating positive client action. So this is actually the doing part. Now that they're aware of it, right? And there's trust in it, and now we need to talk about all the work that we need to do. Let's do the work. So that's an action that leads towards change outside of counseling. Characteristics that often predict a positive outcome for a relationship is, number 1, a safe and a protective environment. So just like I try to create a safe and protective environment for our classroom as a teacher, the same thing happens with a therapist as well. Okay, so it has to be a place where the client feels comfortable and stuff like that. And you can talk about that with your client as well, especially if you have options. I know that some of your student or your classmates have said that they do ecotherapy, which is going outside, taking a walk and stuff like that, because that is how they feel safe and comfortable when talking to a professional. Encourages collaboration. Oh, by the way, for the eco psychology, you do have to also still make sure that confidentiality is happening. You don't want to do a big talk at a gym or anything like that. You would probably want to do it on a more of a one-on-one type thing. All right. Encourages collaboration as well. Shares warmth, caring, affirmation, which basically means, I'm trying to understand you, right? And believe in you. And respect. Identify with their counselors, potential role models. So, who are your heroes? Who are the people that behave in ways that you admire? Goals and procedures are structured, so there is a system of what to do, a list of protocols of what to do when you're doing specific techniques. And then, of course, being engaged, which means that both people want to be there. If your client does not want to be there, it's going to be a little bit harder, okay, or maybe even difficult or impossible. All right, essential components of the Therapeutic Alliance. Carl Rogers, we'll hear about him quite a bit because he's kind of the person he is the person who has established a foundation for modern day therapy, okay? Which means that typically all the therapists and counseling theories believe in you being congruent, having unconditional positive regard for that person, and also empathetic understanding. And we're actually going to define that in the next couple of slides. Additional elements would be respect, trust, confidentiality, use of benevolent power. Benevolent basically means kind, and then commitment as well. Okay, so that's kind of similar to, all those ethical items that we've talked about before: non-malfeasance, beneficence, justice, veracity, and so forth and so on. All right, congruence, which is the first one that Carl Rogers is talking about, is to be genuine and real in a relationship, okay? You want to be honest, you want to be transparent, which basically means that they see who you are, and you want to be able to be open, okay? So what the congruence also, I just want to say is, let's say that you are the therapist, and you say, I believe in you, right? I am hoping, and everyone else is hoping, that you really do believe in that person inside your heart. Okay, so you're not just saying it just because you want to say it to encourage them. You honestly do believe in it. If you don't, I don't think you should say those things, right? Let's work on it before you're able to finally be congruent inside and outside. Congruent basically means equal, the same. Okay, all right. Warm, unconditional, positive regard, accepting the client without evaluation or judgment, with warmth and safety, liked and prized as a person. So this one's a little bit controversial as well, because students ask questions about this, and I think they're great questions as well. So when a client comes in to receive services, you want to welcome them and say, this is fantastic that you're coming in. But it does not necessarily mean that you agree with what they have done in the past. So for example, if you know someone who is found guilty, you're working in a prison system where they have molested children, right? You're not condoning them when you say, welcome in here. What you are saying is that you are coming in here. You had the choice, right, to come in here and, to work on yourself and to talk about it. And also you are willing to go through the entire sessions, like let's say it's a year-long session or whatever, or a year-long relationship. So you are welcoming them because they're a person who is now saying, oh, maybe I need to explore, other ways that are healthier than what I have been living in the past. Okay, so again, we're not necessarily saying, oh yeah, it's totally fine that you molested children. Nope, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that we want to welcome them coming in because they are now trying to be a better person. Okay, will it happen? We don't know, right? But at least we know that they're trying, hopefully. All right, empathy is understanding the client's experiences and feeling as if they were your own, but also being able to communicate that as well, right? So you can say, I understand, and then you should be able to kind of say something that is kind of like a correlation or a connection with what they're saying as well. So let's say, for example, your client lost their mother. You have your mother still alive, so you obviously cannot say, I know what it feels like to lose a mother, because you have not. But you can say something like, I know what it feels like to lose a loved one, a family member, and it's so difficult, right? Although it might not be exactly the same with you today, just know that my heart feels the same way that you are feeling right now. And I hope that we can work through this or get through this or try to at least start the healing process. Fundamental skills and concepts. So attending behaviors and basic listening skills. So attending behaviors means to attend, which means to be present and there, right? So these are actions that you do when you're with someone, and also basic listening skills. Listening skills is actually quite hard because you think you're listening, but you're not, especially in this world today with all the distractions that we have. So attending skills that we're going to talk about next are eye contact, body language, vocal quality, and verbal tracking. So let's go through each of these. So eye contact is not necessarily unwavering staring, right? Unwavering means like you're not going to stop. You're going to just stare at that person. No, that can be a little scary. So intermittent, which means occasionally yet frequent looking in the eyes of the client. So you should go back to their eyes. You can look away, come back and look at their eyes again. Because this is showing that you're connecting with this person or understanding them. Okay. Provide feedback to the client. So as you're looking at them, you also want to talk, right? And so you're going to listen to them and then also respond back in that way. And let's say also emotionally, if a person is crying, your eyes will express that you understand that they're crying and they're in pain right now. Have a comfortable distance between the client and the helper. So again, typically in American society, about 3 feet is appropriate for distance. And then cultural consideration. So that means in some cultures, you do not stare people in the eyes. And staring at someone in the eyes is considered maybe threatening. So you want to be careful. You want to gauge it and see what happens. Personally, for me, I don't like looking into other people's eyes because that's how I was raised. However, I'm a teacher and I also do counseling in that sense. So I have to force myself and make myself become comfortable with it, right? And now I'm totally comfortable with it and everything like that. But typically, like, I don't look at people's, in the eyes immediately in a socializing, social environment or anything like that. But again, when the time calls for it, I'm able to do it, and that's because of practice. Attentive body language. In Western culture, typically that is defined as a slight forward body lean and a relaxed, comfortable posture. You can think of the word solar, S-O-L-E-R. I know it's not a real word, but S-O-L-E-R. So S stands for squarely face the client. O is open body posture. Open body posture means that you're not crossing your hands in front of your chest. Okay. L is lean forward slightly. E is eye contact, and then R is relaxed manner. And so we can actually practice this in our class activities and stuff like that, where some of you all kind of lean back, where your head is all the way to the back, and that's not necessarily that's too relaxed, I would say, right? So we're going to practice a little bit about this as well. If you not look at the image of this in the slide, and you sort of see how that woman in the middle is leaning forward a little bit with an open and relaxed body posture. Distance, optimal comfort zone for you want to consider cultural considerations as well. And also in some religions, men and women do not touch. So for sure, you might not even be able to shake someone's hand. You want to pay attention to the cultural competencies in this field. So vocal tone. Warm, pleasant, caring voice strongly indicates an interest and willingness to listen to the client. So ask your friends, your family, hey, what do you think about my voice? Is it warm? Is it pleasant? Do I sound caring? Right? When you're trying to and you want to, right? We don't want you to all make like a fake voice like that. Pitch, volume, and rate of speech can convey much of what one's feeling towards another person or situation. I had one student who was doing their internship, and he had a lot of information that he needed to cover. And so he would talk really fast. And the client or the person receiving the information was just like looking at him like frantically, like, oh my gosh, you're going so fast, but never said anything. So it's up to you as a professional to read other people's body language and say, oh, am I moving too fast? If so, let me know so that I can, provide you with the information that you can, receive at that moment. So these are things that require you to be self-aware as well. Okay. And again, with all of this advice, if you hear other people say it, if you hear me saying it, it is because we want you to grow constructively, like as a better professional in this field. But do you need to take our advice or our observations? No, you do not have to, and it's totally fine, right? But it is, typically people doing this because they do want you to be a better person, a better communicator, let's say. Can you convey either highs or lows levels of self-confidence? So you need to see, what your tone of voice sounds like. I do know that I have kind of a Southern California uptalk, which sounds like everything I'm saying sounds like it's a question, and it really isn't. So it is also a regional thing as well, and I'm very well aware of it. I'm trying really hard, and I know that I say the word right a lot, so I'm trying to actually stop doing that as well. Confidence in the counselor can increase client satisfaction in counseling. So if you sound confident, you sound like you know what you're talking about because you do know what you're talking about because you study, it's going to be great. It's going to also be expressed in your vocal tones. Verbal tracking. So verbal tracking is when the client engages in a long, let's say, irrelevant talk, like they can just talk about whatever, the counselor still needs to be able to remain relaxed and follow what the client's topic and logic is going. So sometimes when I'm listening to someone and they're saying something and then suddenly they go off into a tangent, which is like another thing, you're able to pull them back over to the original thought or follow them through the tangent and go, oh, so are you going over here because of what you're talking about over here, right? So verbal tracking is maybe be able to understand where they are going with their conversation. Dependent on orientation. So some people have selective attention. Counselor can choose to attend or ignore certain portions of the statement. So maybe they do go on tangents and you're like, you know what, that part isn't really important. Let's pull us back over to the original. Then you can do that as well. So it's up to you to decide how you want to do it, because some of the people that we know, when they talk a lot, right? And so they're not necessarily aware of time and space and all that other stuff. And as a professional in this field, listening to them, you're able to bring them back. Silence. It's culturally based. Okay. Some of y'all are very comfortable with silence and some of you are not. You will have the TV on, you will have your Spotify on or whatever it is, or YouTube on, because you don't like it. I know people who also have the TV on all night as well. So this is a challenge for those people, is can you have silence in your life? Again, it's culturally based. Give the client time to think further or process the issues at hand for a deeper level of understanding. So sometimes when a client is talking to me and I want them to start thinking about something, I might provide some observations or a question, and then I will let them, think about it for a little bit. I'm not going to try to fill it up with noise or words or anything like that. We'll just sit with it, okay? Silence is an excellent tactic. A tactic is kind of like a method to start a reluctant client talking, because silence can be perceived as uncomfortable. So for some clients, they'll talk because they don't like the silence, and that's a really good thing as well. Counselors must learn to be comfortable with silence to use it effectively. So again, I challenge you, if you're not often quiet, to start trying to do that and see what happens to yourself. Be aware of the senses in your body when silence is around you. Okay, now we're talking about active listening. Hearing the client accurately is an empathetic skill. So client observation. So you're looking at them, noticing client nonverbal behavior. Nonverbal behaviors are things that they do not say, but they move their body in specific ways. Okay. When you are actively listening, you're encouraging them, because you're like hearing what they say and you're like, oh yeah, I totally get that. That makes sense, right? Or paraphrasing. So once you listen to them, you're like, oh, so what you're saying here is that you are trying to get a better relationship with your father while he is going through sobriety, right? Your client might not have said those specific words, but you're able to paraphrase it to let them know. Summarization statements typically happen at the end of, let's say, an hour-long meeting. We're like, okay, so today what we covered was this, this, and this, right? So it's a quick, point, the main topic points, so that your client knows that you've been listening this entire time. Reflection of client feelings. So typically that and paraphrasing can go together, where, you're like, you were showing me how, you looked like you were really sad when you were talking about your father and his struggles for sobriety, right? So now you're reflecting a feeling that you got from your client when they were talking about a specific subject. And it's really important. I would actually encourage you to practice that more and more often. We're like, wow, you're looking really happy now that you're done with all your work, right? You want to start practicing so it becomes very comfortable with you when you're talking to people. And then open and close-ended questions are basically questions where, tell me more. And that would be an open-ended question because it kind of allows your client to respond kind of almost like in a paragraph, a couple of sentences. Whereas closed-ended questions are typically yes or no, or like, how old are you? And you're like, I'm 25. So that's a closed-ended because that's all it is. What you don't want to do is obsess over closed-ended questions because it's going to start to sound like a questionnaire and your client will stop talking because they're like, oh, I'm just going to wait for you to ask the next question. Right. So again, definitely you want to pay attention to those, and we'll practice this in this class, obviously, and in your other classes as well. Client observation. So observing the client provides the counselor with a rich source of silent information. So when you're looking at someone, you're going to kind of see a whole picture, right? And this is why you'll hear maybe old school therapists and counselors who are not really into, let's say, Zoom, because you don't get to see the entire body. Right? Maybe the person is shaking their leg or tapping their leg or pulling and closing like the lid of their pen that they're holding or something like that. And that can convey some messages for us. Physiological cues basically means body movements expressed in another person's appearance and physique provides a way to identify the internal emotional responses of that other person. So again, how you move your body can potentially let us know how you're feeling, right? We hear about this with, I think, like in poker, like when people play poker, like they're reading body language. Are they lying? Are they not lying? And stuff like that. And that is nonverbal observations of that person. So it could mean changes in skin color. So that means someone who might be blushing. Pupil dilation. So the black part of your eye in the middle gets bigger and smaller. And sometimes, there are reasons why that happens. Muscle tone. Are you tensed up? Are you really like clenching your muscles and stuff like that because you're so stressed out? Or are you very relaxed? Breathing. Are you doing shallow breathing? Or are you doing long, deep breathing or regular breathing, whatever it is? We want to know, because if you're hyperventilating, which means that you can't feel like you're able to breathe, that can be a sign of panic, obviously, right? Difficult to hide because they are generally involuntary reactions of the autonomic nervous system, which basically means that those are things that typically your body just does without your control. So when we can see it, when you're blushing, that means that we can see that there might be something going on at that moment in your head. Verbal behavior, notice topic changes or topic exclusions. So when you're talking to them and then they change the subject, or they won't talk about certain things. Keywords that appear often, such as should or ought. Sentence structure, is the client the subject or the object? So how are they talking about themselves? Incongruities basically means like they might say something, but they don't do it. Like, I'm going to go to AA, but they never go to AA, right? So that would be considered incongruent. It's not the same. It's not equal because you're saying this, but you're not doing it. Discrepancies, again, very similar to that, and double messages, reasons why client cannot resolve life situations. So they might say something for a double message as, I really want to reconnect with my father, but if there's a party going on and I have the option between my father and my party, I'm going to go to the party instead. So that would be a double message right there. Counselors can choose to hold back and say nothing or try to bring it to the client's attention. Considerations are client's emotional state and impact upon that relationship. Encouragers. Using encouragers and restatements. Head nods is considered an encourager because you're saying, oh yeah, I understand. Oh yeah, tell me more, right? So it's an interested facial expression. You might say some verbal utterances such as or okay. So all those things are considered encouragers because it's going to hopefully have your client, once they hear it, keep on talking. All right. Here's an example. Client says, I was at the end of my rope when my boyfriend broke up with me. And then the counselor says, oh, end of your rope? So then from there, that client will now be encouraged to keep on talking, because what does that mean, right? It might mean different things to different people. Okay, paraphrasing. Use to reflect the content of what the client has just said, the essence of it. You're not parroting. So a parrot, like a parrot, right? A bird. So a bird will respond to you exactly the way that you said something to them. So let's say you say, Polly want a cracker? the bird will say, Polly want a cracker, right? It's not going to say, I want a cracker now that it knows what you're talking about. Its name is Polly. No. So it's just mimicking or it's copying, but it's not necessarily actually saying that it understands what it's doing. It knows that if it says Polly want a cracker, you're going to give it a cracker. So it's a reward, right? So it's not the same thing as parroting when you paraphrase. So here's an example. The client says, I wish I could take back some of the mean, hurtful things I said to my friend, but now he's being deployed and I don't have a chance. And who knows what will happen. So the counselor might paraphrase this way. You wish you could talk to your friend and apologize for what you said in the past, but now you don't have that opportunity, and you think of the uncertainty of the situation with him going to fight in the war. So do you see how it's very similar? But you are rephrasing it or paraphrasing it, basically, to let them know that you understood what they were saying in the first sentence right there. Summarizations, paraphrasing longer periods of conversation, such as facts, feelings, meaning, and patterns. And it gives the client a feeling of movement because you're kind of like summarizing the whole thing that's happening, right? You can use at the beginning to set up a session to warm up the client. So you might say something like, so last week we talked about these 3 things, right? And then you say those 3 things. Or you can use at the end, like I said before in the previous earlier slide, use at the end to bring closure to the theme. So you might say something, so today we covered this, this, and that, right? And this is where we're going to go from here, right? And then you talk about, let's say, the treatment plan or goals and objectives or whatever it is that you're talking about. Here's an example. Your counselor says, you're feeling uncertain about lots of things in your life right now, your relationship with your friends, relationship with your parents, and trying to figure out who you are and where you fit in. So do you see how that's a bigger picture type of summarization versus a paraphrase, which is very specific to something that they just said? Okay, reflection of feelings. So reflection of feelings is listens and watches for both verbal messages and direct verbal communication to accurately determine the feelings being expressed by that client. So here you're going to pay attention to how they look, how they're moving their bodies, also how they're talking, their tone, so you can get a bigger picture of what's going on right now. It will help the client feel understood. It allows clients to sort out complex feelings. So they're going to start to think about like, oh, this is what I'm feeling or what, right? Because sometimes when you do it, they might correct you. Okay, it's like, oh, okay, good. So now we know we're on the same page. Counselor must be able to recognize different emotions such as anger, gladness, sadness, fear, uncertainty, and intensity of those emotions. And we talked a little bit about that with that emotion and feelings chart that we talked about earlier. So this is definitely part of that requirement. So here's an example. The client says, I know that dad had an affair while he and mom were married, and I'll never get over that. And now he wants to just trade us in for his new family, right? The counselor might say, you're really angry. So that's a reflection of feeling. You're really angry with your dad and resent the fact that he's starting over with someone else, right? So you can see that. And you can do that with the paraphrasing as well. You can also add that, like, you're feeling frustrated or you're feeling sad, or I notice that you're feeling sad, and then you can paraphrase or reflect that feeling. Remember, laughter may be used as a defense mechanism to mask anxiety, sadness, pain, and confusion. So just because someone's laughing doesn't mean that they're happy. They might do it because they're uncomfortable and they don't know what else to do. Are you one of those people? Do you sometimes giggle in the most uncomfortable positions or situations because you're like, oh, I don't know how else to respond to this? So you start laughing or whatever. So you have to pay attention to the context of laughing and other expressions. Okay, questioning. So opening up communication is one way, is by questioning people. So there are 2 types that we talked a little bit about before, which is open-ended questions and then also closed-ended, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So open-ended questions are talk more freely and openly. What, how, could, and would. So something like, what are you feeling at this moment, right? Or how can you explain why your dad was doing that to you, right? Or could it be that there was a misunderstanding in the situation and then you allow them to then respond, right? Or would, again, all these are typical ways to start an open-ended question. And remember, open-ended means that you're going to hear your client respond in multiple sentences. It's not just a yes or no. All right, provide longer answers. They begin the interview, encourage clients to express more information. They elicit examples of behaviors, thoughts, and feelings. So that basically means is that this will encourage them to talk about those things and increase the client's commitment to communicate. So it allows them to start talking and feel comfortable being able to talk. Sometimes a client can feel scared of the therapist or the counselor or the caseworker, so they don't talk at all, right? But by doing this, having them do open-ended questions and listening to them and paraphrasing, summarizing all those things that we were doing before, so that they go, okay, yeah, you get me, and you're making it so that I can say whatever's on my mind. Here's an example. The counselor says, what obstacles do you think might get in the way of you reaching your goals? And the counselor might say, how do you plan to reestablish that friendship? So these are ways where you're going to get your client to hopefully open up and talk a little bit more. Close-ended questions, on the other hand, is when clients are very talkative and rambles or just, goes from topic to topic. So this allows for clarity, focus, and narrow the area of discussion. So this is, are, do, and did are typical question starters. Be careful of using too many close-ended questions. Why? Because it feels like you're being interrogated, just like in the police, right? Like, why do you do this? What did you do this? What were you doing here? So then they're like, oh no, they're like, I feel like I have to be defensive at this moment. So you want to do a mixture of both, depending on the conversation, and be able to be aware that you do those two things as well. All right. Do not ask too many close-ended questions before establishing trust. Sometimes the same information can be found within the conversation without asking close-ended questions. So sometimes you'll get the answer when you ask them the open-ended question. You just have to note it into your paperwork. Why questions make people feel defensive. So like, why did you do that? Well, why did you think that would happen? Or why? When little kids ask adults, like, why is the sky blue? Well, why is it that? It gets annoying after a while, right? So the same thing happens when you're asking your client, why? Because you're like, you need to justify why you did all these wrong things. That's typically what it feels like, right? And so you don't want to start asking why questions too much. Concreteness helps the client clarify the pieces of the puzzle and fit them together so that the whole makes sense to the client. Organize specific and workable action plan, the what and the how. So here, what we're talking about is concreteness as something that we see and we can understand, right? If it moves around too much, like let's say clay or Play-Doh, it moves around a lot. It's very malleable. So you might not necessarily understand what's going on because it can shift at any time. Concreteness is about hard, facts basically, or what is going on at this moment. We're both understanding. Okay. Here's an example. The client says, I just want to feel like I belong somewhere. So obviously that sounds like very malleable. Like, what does that mean? Each day you're going to feel maybe a little bit different, right? So the counselor is going to say, for concreteness is, describe for me a specific time or situation in your life when you remember feeling that way. Okay. So now we're starting to go exactly a specific moment in time that they're going to explain, right? And then from there, we know that they're having concrete ideas of that. Or if you don't understand what it is, now you're asking them to clarify it, and they will. Self-attending skills or self-awareness. So are you really aware of how people see you? Okay. Practically speaking, the counselor should not consciously rehearse how counselors are supposed to be. So and you'll hear me say this, is that oftentimes I'll give you scripts, like, what to say. But I also say to you, but say it in the language that makes it comfortable to you. Because I don't want you to sound like a robot or like a ChatGPT AI thing, right? Because now that we've had about a year of looking and reading through AI, we all can sort of guess how AI talks. And you're like, well, there's something a little off about this, right? You're saying the right things, but it's not necessarily in the right way, or a really weird way, a unique way, or a repetitive way that people should not say, right? So developing that skill set so that it doesn't sound like you're just like, a robot. Effective counselor acts professionally, but does not put on a professional front, playing, acting some imaginary expert counselor. Be yourself. Okay, be your professional self. That's the best advice I can say. I hope that you see me as an authentic person, but you obviously probably know that when I'm alone with my friends, and stuff like that, not in school or not in a professional setting, I probably act a little bit different, right? But when I'm at school, I'm still being myself, but also not necessarily saying things that are inappropriate because I'm trying to be a professional. Okay. Know their strengths and weaknesses. Better self understanding helps overcome self consciousness and devote full attention to the client. So what we're hoping is that you understand your feelings as well. So when people make, let's say something and you feel embarrassed, admit to it, address it, like, why was I feeling embarrassed and how can I fix that so that doesn't happen again? Obviously, things are going to be embarrassing, or, you said something you regret and you'll always regret it for the rest of your life, but you also want to move on and say, so this is what I'm going to do instead so that I don't ever embarrass myself again in that way. Centering and relaxing. Being in touch and in tune with yourself is really important. And it takes a while. It takes a lot of work. Most of you are in your 20s, so you are at the beginning stages of this. Maybe by the time you're in your 30s, you'll feel a lot more in touch and in tune with yourself because you have not been exposed to a lot of real world situations potentially yet, right? So, again, this takes time. That's what I'm trying to say. Don't try to be someone who's, in tune with everything by the time you're 21, 22, because most likely you have not experienced enough to really understand how to react, how to feel in certain situations. We'll be able to show more social emotional presence once you're experiencing life, right? Counseling can be stressful, so a relaxed physical and psychological demeanor from the counselor will help clients relax as they deal with challenges. And so you might see that with older clients with a younger counselor or helper. The older one might say, you're so young. What have you experienced in life that you think you can help me? So it's definitely something where you need to be able to figure out who you are. But again, it will take time and it's okay. Non-judgmental attitudes. Have a broad awareness of your own value position. So who are you? Get to know who you are as a person. What is important to you? And am I non-judgmental? Some of y'all think that you're non-judgmental until I say something and then I hear you, or your eyes roll in the back of your head because you are like, I cannot believe that person's saying that. We can see those things, right? Or your body will tense up. Remember those autonomic, nervous system reactions and behaviors, right? We can typically tell. Non-judgmental attitude towards others, being warm, accepting, and respectful towards the client, especially at the beginning. Allow the client to be open and to be themselves, right? Whenever I talk to someone, even if I know that they're a difficult person, I still want to be welcoming to them because I want to treat them fairly like every other person. But it takes a while to practice to do that because sometimes you're like, I know you are a troublemaker, and then you might talk to them in a more limited way versus another person. And why is that happening right now, right? So think about that. Get in touch with yourself. Genuineness. Communicating genuineness is when counselors relate to clients naturally and openly, and they're being genuine. So here's an example. The client says, do you think I'm crazy and weird as I feel? And then the counselor says, you've been going through some difficult situations and you're feeling confused and about what to do. I don't experience you as being crazy and weird at all, right? Because you're justifying to them why they might be feeling these things, but at the same time, you have the right to because you've gone through so many, weird things happening lately. So again, it allows you to connect and you're being genuine with them. Okay. Cultural competence. So cultural competence, again, is to understand the diversity of this world. Counselors' responsibility to educate oneself about cultural diversity and to become culturally competent. College is a wonderful place for you to build your cultural competency because look around you. There are people from all over the world, ethnically and stuff like that, culturally, around you. There are a lot of people who experience things that you have never experienced and may never ever experience, right? So all that stuff is really amazing and will allow you to be much more culturally competent than someone who goes to a school with no diversity, no, being very sheltered, let's say, with your family, like having no friends and stuff like that, because you're not going to see how the world really works. You only see how you work and your family work and your community, maybe your small community work, but it's definitely not going to be the same as other people's families, right? Have you ever gone to other people's family parties and you're like, whoa, this is totally nutsoid and crazy. Like this family is yelling at each other, but they're having fun at the same time. And your family might be super quiet and not talking. So it's going to be very different. And it's good for you to all experience the differences. Okay. Increase levels of awareness and sensitivity for clients of different ethnicities. Become aware of your own cultural heritage and how it affects you as a counselor. So, some of the things that you were raised with, how does that affect how you see the world and how you might approach a problem? Become aware of your own biases and prejudices, including racism. The sad fact is that we were all raised pretty much in one way or another to judge other people who are different than us, right? So those are biases. So we all have them. Just admit to them and then say, but I'm not going to let those things affect me when I'm working or when I'm relating to other people. Okay. Again, it's not a good thing or a bad thing that your parents raised you that way. It was just how they thought they could protect you. Right. But of course, our parents can be wrong on many things and right on many things. Right. We're all people. We're not, perfect 100% ever. So, some of your parents may be from your perspective. Right. But in general, we want to be aware that this is happening to all of us. Seek opportunities to interact with people of different cultures and learn from those experiences. Examine your understanding of poverty and how it affects different cultures. And look at your own positions of power and privilege. Again, one privilege that you all have is that you're going to get a college education. That is not something that most people in this world get. So it's really awesome that you're able to do this. I hope that you take it seriously, learn as much as you can, read your books and study and talk to people, make friends, so that you are able to really enjoy and reap the benefits of being culturally competent. Humor. A counselor who can enjoy and use humor effectively as an invaluable asset. It is really important to be able to have a sense of humor. Okay. Although counseling is a serious business, there are humorous dimensions to the human condition. And sometimes when your client finally realizes something, they'll start laughing, right? You're like, oh my gosh, this entire time I thought I was being really, really relaxed, but I was really, really tense. That's so funny because that's not what I thought at all. So then they might start laughing and stuff like that. Connecting with clients, joking can release built up tensions. Laughing at oneself can be extremely therapeutic, but again, caution. Humor can be defined, interpreted, and valued differently by different people from different cultures. I'll give you one example. My mom does not understand sarcasm. So I might say something really sarcastic, and then she's like, what? Are you serious right now? Are you trying to hurt me? And I'm like, Mom, no, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just trying to be, funny. She's like, that's not funny. And I'm like, oh, all right. So those types of people, I usually don't joke around anymore. And in class, I might joke around with you, but if you guys think that I'm being a little too jokey, I will stop it, I will respect it, and then we'll move along. Touch. Believed to genuinely help create a willingness to share and be open. Context is a key. So context is a situation, so you need to be considerate of that and be aware of that. Caution is that when working with people who have experienced trauma by physical or sexual abuse, you would not necessarily want to touch them. You can touch the client's hand, arm, shoulder, up or back, but not the other parts, okay? But obviously, because of, let's say, the pandemic and stuff, we're actually not touching each other as much as we used to. There are good and bads on that. But typically in a professional setting, I will maybe touch them by shaking their hands. I might not even touch hands anymore. We can do fist bumps or whatever, or elbow bumps and stuff like that. But touch is not as common as it used to be. I would still offer, let's say, a client who's crying or going through a lot of trauma, I would say, would you like a hug, right? And if they say no, then we move along, okay? But you also need to be comfortable with that as well. I know that not every one of you all are comfortable with that, so it's up to you to decide where you are when it comes to that type of opportunity between a client and a counselor. Also, gender differences will play a role in about touching. Like we said before, depending on certain religions or cultures, men and women do not touch each other, okay? So again, cultural considerations. Okay, advanced skills and concepts. Advanced skills and concepts are advanced empathy, self-disclosure, confrontation, immediacy, action skills, and termination skills. And you probably heard of some of this already, but we want to go through and make sure that you're all aware of it so that we're all on a similar page. All right, advanced empathy. Identification of themes presented by the client, the feelings, the behavior, the experiences, or a combination of all those things. Once a counselor recognizes the themes that are emerging from your client, you want to talk about the relevant ones to them. You want to help the client fill in the missing links into the information, because maybe they're doing a pattern, but they don't realize they're doing a pattern. So now they're like, oh, I am doing this. I am choosing people who need a lot of help so that I feel valued, let's say, or something like that. But be careful about premature interpretation. Be careful of speculation or unfounded connections. Just because you want to hear them talk about it plenty of times so that you have evidence, right? You don't want to just automatically jump to, oh, you're really codependent. No, be careful about that. Okay, self-disclosure. Clients want to have information about the counselor. Do not share personal problems with your client. Connection that is developed by people that have gone through similar difficulties. So for example, here is something where you can say that if you're an addiction specialist or a counselor, you can say, I understand what it feels like to be addicted, right? Or have an addiction. So you can sort of talk about that, but I wouldn't go into super deep detail unless the culture of the place where you're working is doing that. Okay. You also want to consider when you disclose. So depending on what kind of information you're disclosing, it could be at the beginning, or it could be in the middle, or it could be at the end. So consider timing, goals, genuineness, and appropriateness. So you want to focus on the relationship between you and the client. And if you have a difficult time listening to a client, you might want to let them know. So your disclosing is like, I'm having a hard time following you right now. I'm not sure what's going on. You want to be honest and genuine about that. Or how does the client perceive the counselor if the counselor does not self-disclose or self-discloses too much? So I have a person I know who is a therapist who says that she will never say anything about her own personal experiences with addiction if she was doing addiction therapy. And I thought that was really interesting, because I'm like, why are you so closed up on that? And I wonder if her clients would say the same thing as well, right? Or maybe if you share too much, your client might go, am I your therapist or are you my therapist? And then that becomes a potential issue as well. Okay, confrontation used when there are discrepancies, conflicts, or mixed messages being sent by the client. Verbal and nonverbal messages are mixed up, so you want to now confront them about that. But you have to be careful. Confrontation is a really sensitive technique to use, and you need to know how to use it. Okay, you want the client to progress and not go into denial or basically stop coming to therapy because you confronted them in a way that they made them feel uncomfortable. You want to reflect accurately the situation, and you do not want to confront too early in the relationship. Definitely, I would never confront someone at the beginning of the relationship. It's once we're comfortable, we have a flow, we're able to be, you're able to see your client receive, let's say, responses from what they're sharing. And then that's when I would start to confront if there's a need for it. And of course, obviously, cultural considerations. Sometimes some cultures don't like confrontation at all. They find it very threatening, so then they might end therapy, and that would be an ethical issue. All right, here's an example. Client says, I want to have a close relationship with my dad. We have specific dates when we're supposed to meet for dinner, and that's okay. But if I have anything else to do, I'll usually make an excuse and not go. So you can see right there, there's a double message that we talked about earlier, right? So the counselor might say something like this. On one hand, I hear you saying that you want a closer relationship with your dad, but on the other hand, you often make excuses so you don't have to meet up with him for dinner. Can you help me understand this? Right? We want to understand why your client is saying those things. So immediacy is focusing on the here and now. Here's an example. The client says, I'm not sure I should tell you about all the other stupid things I've done. The counselor can respond back with, it sounds like something is getting in the way of you trusting me to understand everything that's happened to you in your life without judging you. So you're basically confronting them at this right time, but you're also justifying it with a reason, right? And that reason can then lead to a conversation where, yeah, you don't have to tell me now, but hopefully in the near future, when there's more trust and stuff like that, then you can share it to me. But I'm letting you know now that you can share with me if you want to. Spirituality. It's a part of one's demographic makeup. So demographic basically means characteristics about you. We talked a little bit about that with intersectionality, right? So demographic is like age, marital status, ethnicity, sexual identity, religion. So spirituality is connected to that religion part. Spirituality or an absence of spirituality may be part of a client's life. It is a one-on-one, like an individual thing, right? So each person is going to be a little bit different. It's subjective. Subjective means that, let's say that you have two people who are Christians. they might actually see it very differently. They might interpret it very differently. And that's what subjective is, kind of like your own opinion about this, right? Or your own take on it. Emotional. So for some people, it's a very emotional thing. It's inward, so it goes inwards with who you are when it comes to your spiritual relationship. And it could also be unsystematic, which means that there might not be a logic that you can follow. Okay. There's a thing called dogma, and dogma is basically a set of beliefs within a religion or a spiritual, organization, where you don't necessarily ask those questions because you're just supposed to accept it. Okay. And for some religions, that's how it is. And then that is all it is. Okay. So you cannot try to question it to make sense because it's not supposed to. All right, there are 4 stages of spiritual growth. There's egocentric and unprincipled life, so that typically is a young child. And then self-serving adults. It's like, the reason why you're religious is because it helps you in one way or another. Belief in a given religion and church going tied to religious dogma and does not tolerate of other religions. So again, we talked about the word dogma before, where belief in a given religion and church going means that you're dedicated to this, right? So you're like, this is who I am, this is what I believe in how the world is, and you cannot change me. Questioning stage is examining of religious practices. Maybe keep the ones you feel are right and truthful. So as you're getting older, imagine as a child you learned all this stuff and you're like, this is how it is. God had an intention, a way. But as you're getting older, you meet different people. You might start to question whether or not all those things are accurate or true, or why is that happening, right? And you'll also hear some people use the word salad bar, let's say salad bar Catholic, okay? Or a all-you-can-eat Catholic. So imagine when you're going to an all-you-can-eat buffet, you're choosing certain things that you want to eat, while other foods that you can eat you don't want, right? So in some people's religions, they say, I like this part and this part of this religion, but I don't like this other part, so I'm not going to deal with that part, right? So that could come and be part of this questioning stage that we're talking about right here. Universal loving and acceptance, connection with all living things. So hopefully maybe at the end, you'll realize that, this is your religion and you think that it makes you a good person and that you respect other people with their religions and that they also want love and peace and stuff like that as well, right? So are you able then to connect with everyone? And for some people, they might say, I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. Because sometimes religion comes with that dogma that we were talking about before that is not necessarily welcoming and inclusive of other people's and their cultures and their religions or spirituality. Termination is basically when you're ending something, right? So we're ending the therapeutic relationship. So one of the most frustrating aspects of the relationship is this termination, but it does occur by mutual agreement, which means that you both decide that, okay, this is when we're going to end it, or it could end prematurely, which means unexpectedly. If all the goals of counseling has been accomplished, you typically will have a mutual agreement that we're done, right? And there's a sense of sadness about parting and some anxiety that may be expected, but leave with a sense of growth and accomplishment. So you want to definitely cheerlead them and say, look at all the things that you've learned, in the last 15 weeks of working together. Leave time to discuss the termination before it happens. So typically, for me, I divide things into 4s, right? So let's say that it is 15 weeks or so. 15 weeks divided by 4, so it's like about 3 or 4 weeks, right? So we might say something like, we're a third of the way or a fourth of the way in. How are you feeling right now? We're in the middle, halfway through our relationship. Do you feel like you're on the right track? Are we moving fast enough for you to maybe achieve your stuff by the end of this relationship that we have? And you might say something like, we have 7 weeks left now. So how are you feeling? And sometimes people need that stressor, that little bit of anxiety, so that they pick up the pace to work on themselves. Okay, so you definitely want to leave time to discuss termination before it actually happens. And clients must know when the last session will occur. You cannot say, oh, today's the last day, bye. You cannot do that because there is a sense of abandonment, and that's considered unethical. Okay, when we talk about prematurely, which was at the second bullet here, it could be your client decides, what, I'm done. Or I don't like you as a therapist. I'm done, right? Or they want to move to another person, so it could end prematurely. However, it could also be because of the counselor who ends it, and we'll talk about it in the next slide. So if the counselor ends a relationship prematurely, the client needs to be informed as early as possible. And typically you actually let them know on the first day when you meet with informed consent. You'll say, if something happens, this is what is going to be the next step in our agency. Okay. May happen in school settings or agencies with session limits. There is a perceived lack of commitment by the client. So maybe the therapist is going to end it because the client doesn't seem like they're really connected to this. The reason must be specific to the client, may lead the client to feel rejected or abandoned, like we said before. So you need to really talk about this ending or termination of the relationship. You also always want to refer the person to another agency or counselor, or remind them that this is an open door policy. So after, let's say, a couple of months or whatever, they feel like they need to come back for some more, that they're welcome to do that. Okay. Typically, most agencies are open door policies like that. I'm sure there's unique reasons why it might not happen, but typically it is an open door policy. Also, it could be because of an emergency where the therapist is moving, right? Or some other emergency. So those are all things where on the first week when you meet them, you need to explain to them, if something happens, this is what's going to happen with you. I'll refer you to another counselor at this agency, and then we'll move along that way. If the client ends a relationship prematurely, that means that the client wants to leave, right? Counselors should reach out to the client to explore the reasons why. So if they just stop showing up, then you would want to probably make a phone call, reach out to them, and find out so that you can document it in your records. Counselors should reach out and the client to explore the reasons why, let the client know that they're in charge of the decision and that they're welcome back in the future, or offer a referral. So again, you want to let them know about the open door policy, and then also what are the other resources that they can have if they don't like your agency itself. Mutual termination is the review of the goals that have been reached or not reached. Client may work on those on their own now that they have a set of coping skills to work on in a personal life. So let's say that they're trying to achieve something in 15 weeks but didn't happen, but they feel like they're good now and they end it, then they can still reach those goals that they want, right? Remind the client of their strengths, new coping strategies, and network of supports that they have, and then promote self-reliance, which basically means that they now can depend on themselves and continue to help themselves if they choose to do so. All right, that's the end of this lecture. Bye.